Thank you, brethren, for coming tonight. I know a little bit about your Saturdays. I know what my Saturdays were like when I was a stake president. They're much different now. I'm just gone on the weekends. My honeydews are tried to be done in between, but I know what your weekends are like. And every time I come down here to the Phoenix area, I don't know whether I have just found the city of Enoch or whether you're ready to follow up Enoch and be lifted up. This is a great stronghold here. And I felt that as we sang that song. You know, I couldn't help, as I sang that song, sing part of it in German. Because when I was a young missionary, we went down to a Mennonite hall after we'd been in the mission home for a week. We went down there. It was late at night on a Sunday night, and they put us in a little entry area there, and they said, the missionaries are tired. It's been a long day. If you'd please be quiet. So we were sitting there, about 8 of us, in our little district, and all of a sudden, there was a door behind us, and then there was some curtains, and all of a sudden these curtains pull apart, and there are about 200 missionaries in the dining room standing on tables and everything, singing this song in German. And even though the song Called to Serve is really the missionary marching song of today, Zeete Völker, or Hark All Ye Nations, is my song. So thank you for singing that tonight. I appreciate the opportunity of being here under such strong leadership. I'm grateful for Elder Tillman and for President Smith and for all of you that are here. You know, I serve just like you do because I care about the youth of the noble birthright. When President Hinckley laid his hands on my head after I was called as the Young Men General President, he said, Brother Dahlquist, I bless you that you might be almost consumed with the work of saving the young men of the kingdom. And you know, even though we were released in April of 2009, I have felt that same drive and that same urgency to do everything that we can to lift the youth and to do what we can to strengthen these great young men and the young women of the Young Women program. They are such a great, strong group. We have a wonderful tool in scouting, but let me tell you a story before I go into that. When I was in Russia, I heard a story, and I'm sure that it came from a missionary from here, but it was of a young man, and I'll just call him Timmy, and he'd just joined the church with his mother, and they were the only ones. He had no older brothers. He had no father in the home, and he was 8, so first week he became a member of the church. He became a Cub Scout. And he went to his Cub Scout meeting, and they gave out little boxes that had little pieces of wood in it. And the assignment was go home and make a pine wood derby car. So he didn't know any of the tradition, didn't have any fathers, brothers. And so he just went home, pulled out the instructions, and started carving on this pine wood derby car and put the wheels on. Nobody told him about silicone. Nobody told him about weighting a car so it would go down fast or anything else. He just slapped a coat of paint on it, put the wheels on, and put some decals on because they were in the box. And then he went to his next meeting, and he was pretty excited, but no pressure. When he got there, he noticed that there were not only a lot of the boys that were there before, but there were a lot of dads, and the dads seemed to be awfully involved in the project. And so he didn't think much about it, but they started the competition, and as it went on, as the night went on, they got to the quarterfinals, and he had won every heat, and so he was getting pretty excited. There was nobody there to really support him, so he was kind of on his own, but he made it through the quarterfinals, and then he got into the semifinals. And he actually made it in the finals with these 4 cars. So they put these 4 cars up there. By this time, he was jumping up and down with all of the other kids, and they were excited and cheering. And they put the cars up there. The Cub Master grabbed the handle and was about ready to pull it down. And this little Jimmy said, "Stop. I can't stand it. I've got to have a prayer." So he leaves the room. And this Cub Master doesn't know what to do. He doesn't know how to respond, so he just waits. A couple of minutes, this little Jimmy comes back, and he says, "Okay, I think I'm ready." So okay, the Cub Master grabs a handle, pulls it down, the cars go down the hill, and Jimmy wins. So kids grab their cars, and all of them head over to the donut table, which is really the reason that the boys came that night. And Jimmy grabs his car, and he's on his way over, excuse me, and his cup master grabs him and says, Jimmy, it's really great that you won. That's really nice, but I don't think it was right to pray to win. And Jimmy said, I didn't pray to win. I prayed that I wouldn't cry when I lost. You know, when I heard that story, I thought, but he prayed. And that's what this great work is all about, is to help these young men so that when they have challenge in their life, whatever it is, that they are prepared. That when they do not know where to go, they are driven to their knees. That they know that there is a kind Heavenly Father who hears their prayers, who is their Creator, who has sent them here for a divine mission and given them wonderful talents and abilities and opportunities, who has sent them here in the dispensation of the fullness of time with all they need to be able to accomplish their mission and to be able to return home and hear, well done, thou good and faithful servant. And that's our charge. That's our work. I was interested as I was reading in 2 Nephi just the other day, where Lehi is talking to his children, and he's just about ready to close up his ministry. And it's interesting, in the first chapter of 2 Nephi in verse 13, and he uses this phrase over and over again. O ye that would awake, awake from a deep sleep, yea, even from the sleep of hell, and shake off the awful chains by which ye are bound. In verse 14, awake and arise from the dust, and hear the voice of the words of a trembling parent. And then down in verse 19, O my sons, that these things might not come upon you, but behold, his way will be done, for his ways are righteousness. In verse 23, awake, my sons, put on the armor of righteousness. That's what our work is all about. You know, one day I was on the telephone with Elder L. Tom Perry, and we were talking about a number of things. You can kind of tell when the agenda is wearing down and when it's time to hang up. So I was about ready to finish the conversation, and he said, "Oh, President, before you hang up, just remember, I hold you responsible for preparing every single young man in the church to serve a mission. Have a great day." Now, does that sound like Elder Perry? And that's the way he was. And, you know, I hung up the phone and I thought, you know, I felt that already. But, boy, I'll tell you, it's real now. And it's really interesting, but the blessing from President Hinckley was on my head, but I think it was a blessing to all of us that serve the youth of the Noble Birthright, everyone that's in this room tonight, and everyone that's listening to this program, all of those who have priesthood callings to work with the rising generation. I think Elder Perry's comment is to every single one of us, to prepare these young men in the very best way that we can, to use every tool that is available for us, and to be able to use the resources that we have. One day, President Hinckley, at the conclusion of our report, we met every 6 months with the First Presidency, and when we'd finish, I'd say, "President, what would you teach us today?" And one day, he said, he thought for a minute, and he said, "Say your prayers and do your work." And we knew our meeting was over. But the message was not just to us. For the next 6 months, we took that message every place we went. Because that message, which came from a living prophet from us, and I'll talk about one other that came from one in a minute, all of those come to you. All of that wisdom that comes from a prophet, I feel is a charge for every single one of us. And so for tonight, as I talk about a number of things that's significant, remember that's all this is about, is helping our young men rise up. Last night, some of you may have heard the meeting that we had with young men and parents and priesthood leaders, where I talked about the song Rise Up. And it's to give these young men an opportunity to rise up and become what they should become. Now, the elephant in the room tonight is because we're here for scouting. And if you'll notice, we have 3 scouting uniforms on right here. And that is, I have the field uniform on, and President Smith has, doesn't he look handsome with his scout tie on? He has that uniform on, and Elder Tillman has the priesthood uniform on, and in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, they're all priesthood uniforms, because scouting is part of the priesthood. And the elephant in the room is where is the church, and where is the church going with regard to scouting? Without belaboring it, can I just tell you of a meeting that we had with Elder Holland? And we have a meeting with him once a year, and with the Key 3, the National Key 3, and we meet with him. His comment was, we are all in. If you want to write something down, could you write that down? We are all in. Now, can you hear Elder Holland saying that from the pulpit? Well, he said it to us, and I will just share that with you. And if others say, well, what about tomorrow? Well, what about tomorrow? President Lee said decades ago, when the Boy Scouts of America stops meeting the needs of the Aaronic priesthood, then we'll look for something else. It's always been that way. From the time President Hinckley's father, Bryant Hinckley, and Oscar A. Kirkham went to New York in about 1910 or 1911 to look at scouting, and then came back and recommended to the 12 and the first presidency that scouting become the activity arm of the Aaronic priesthood, because it was not an activity program alone, it was a character building program. That's what it was. It's not just any activity program. It's not just to give us ideas and resources and opportunities to have activities. It's one that teaches values. Tufts University did a recent study. They took Cub Scouting, and they took two study groups, a group of Cub Scouts and a group those not involved in scouting. And at the end of their research, it was very clear those who were involved in scouting had developed character traits along the areas of cheerfulness, service, helpfulness, all of those character values that we talk about when we raise our arm to the square. And those who were not in scouting had either stayed the same or dropped in that area. Now, I don't know about you, but I want young men, I want my grandsons, I want my son-in-laws to have every single character value that is part of the Scout Oath and Scout Law. I want them to be trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. I can't think of a better guide for missionary preparation. I've seen President Hinckley stand up and do that exact same thing, put his arm to the square and give the Scout Oath and the Scout Law. I've seen President Monson do the same thing. This is something where, again, in the words of Elder Holland, we are all in. Now, you brethren are priesthood leaders, and I think we can talk. And by the way, we've got a chance to have some questions tonight. So if you have questions, I would be pleased to be able to respond to those questions in a few minutes. But can I just suggest that Cub Scouting is doing really well, and Boy Scouting is doing pretty well. Need I go further? Let me tell you a story. Hal Miller was the council president of the Great Salt Lake Council a number of years ago. He's a good friend, and we'd worked together in a Philmont program some years ago. He was telling me an experience that he had. He's an educator, and he was working with some young men who were in a detention facility and who'd had problems with the law. And he had about 8 or 9 of them that he met with on a weekly basis. On this particular time, he said, talking about labels, and I asked them what labels they thought people put on them. Well, dishonest, bad, rotten, delinquent, all of these there. And he said, so what labels would you like them to put on you? And he said, I had 2 Polynesian brothers, one on one side of the table. And one of them said, trustworthy. The other said, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. He said, I didn't know what to say. He said, where did you learn that? They said, in Scouts. His comment was, then why are you here? Their answer is illuminating. They said, when we were 11, 12, and 13, we had a great Scout program. And we learned We achieved and we had a great experience. When we turned 14, there was nothing for us. And therefore, we went to other places which took us to have problems with the law. Now, can I just suggest that a couple of things? There is one doctrinal organizational issue that's really important. Think about the placement of the bishop in the Aaronic priesthood. I think if I were doing the Aaronic priesthood, I would have put the bishop in as the president of the deacons' quorum, so that the deacons have a great experience to begin with. But that's not what the Lord did. He put the bishop as the president of the priest quorum when he knew that they would need a bishop, when they need a leader, when they knew that there would be somebody there who would use every single resource available to be able to help them to become what they needed to become. It's an indictment to us as priesthood leaders when we see the decline in activity in our teachers and our priests. And I will tell you that it's not because of the program, it's because we do not grab onto it, and because we don't hold fast to that which is there. It's because we're not, it's really interesting, but I'm going to talk about 4 T's that we talk about in Aaronic priesthood leadership and in scouting in a minute, but it's time that we rose up. And if there is any place in the kingdom that could do it, it's here in this valley. There are no stronger priesthood leaders any place in the church than right here. Today we had a great day. We had a great day with Baden-Powell University. It was a wonderful day. It's been a long day. But it was amazing how many times the question came up, when are we going to be able to have something for our teacher and priest age boys? Now, I will tell you a little bit about venturing. I know venturing better than I do varsity because I was the chairman of the National Venturing Task Force when we took about to completely renovate venturing. That venturing program is designed for you and for your boys. Every time a proposal came to me, I put it up against a priest quorum. And if it did not work, and if it did not fit exactly in a priest quorum to be able to help young men to be able to become strong missionaries and to prepare for the temple and to be righteous husbands, it was rejected offhand, and I'd say go back. And the program is simpler. It is focused on really 4 areas: adventure, leadership, personal development, and service. It is a wonderful program to be used that will strengthen the priest quorums of the church in a marvelous, marvelous way. Now, I wear the venturing uniform, but you don't have to. Venturing is something where if they don't want to wear a uniform, they don't have to wear a uniform. Don't let that get in the way. Find out about the program. Go down and get the venturing program and then take the cellophane off. It's really important not to just go down and get it, take cellophane off and open it up and crack it and read it. Get some training. Make sure that your leaders get training. Get them to Wood Badge, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But it's time that we rose up, just as we're asking them to rise up and to use these wonderful talents that are available to us. Now, we talk about 4 T's and talking about the leaders and these great leaders. Can I just suggest a couple of things? Number 1, the first T is testimony. We need leaders who have testimonies of the gospel of Jesus Christ, and it doesn't matter where or when they're prepared to bear witness of that which they know. And it will not always end in the name of Jesus Christ, amen. It may be something as simple, well, let me give you one example. We had a brother who was at our open house, our General Conference open house, and I love the question and answer. He was sitting right about here. He said, I just don't get this, how priesthood and scouting come together. He says, working on the fingerprinting merit badge, how in the world does that help these young men get on missions? Our board was watching me, and I thought for a minute, and I said, why don't you come on up here for a minute? So I brought him up here. And I said, okay, you're my scouts, and I'm your leader. We've had a full scout meeting working on fingerprinting merit badge. It's now my time for the Scoutmaster's Minute. So I turned to him and I said, This has been a great evening as we've learned about fingerprinting merit badges. We learned about the old method of taking fingerprints, and we've rolled them, and we've made our fingerprint cards. We talked about technology and how technology, some countries are now using fingerprints for identification and passports. We also learned that everybody has a different fingerprint. And that reminds me and reconfirms to me that we are all individual in the sight of our Heavenly Father. God lives and He has created us in His image, but each individually, and He hears our prayers. A minute. And all of a sudden it brings everything together. And so we need leaders who can bear witness on the river, in the desert, when they're looking at employment, whatever it is, whenever there's an opportunity, who can bear witness that what they're doing is helping them to become better missionaries. That's the first one. The second one is training. Training is extremely important. If you want to look at the training of a prophet, remember Joseph was a clean, pure vessel. And if you look at the 127th section, the 128th section of the Doctrine and Covenants, and now what, in verse 19, now what do we hear in the gospel which we have received? A voice of gladness, a verse of mercy from heaven. Verse 20, what do we hear? Glad tidings from Cumorah, Moroni, an angel from heaven declaring the fulfillment of prophets. A voice of the Lord in the wilderness of Fayette, the voice of Michael, the voice of Peter, James, and John, and again the voice of God in the chamber of old Father Whitmer in Fayette, Seneca County, and the voice of Michael the archangel, of Gabriel, of Raphael, of diverse angels, Michael or Adam down to the present time, all of these to help the prophet to be prepared. And sometimes we figure we don't need training because we have been called. Well, the prophet Joseph was called, but he needed training. And he was provided divine training. And there is training that's available for us. Now, when I was called as a scoutmaster, I thought I was a pretty good scoutmaster. Took my kids up to scout camp, and we did pretty well. And then I finished wood badge. And all of a sudden, I realized there was so much more that I could do. When I went to basic training, I thought I had some pretty good experience. I was very young, but I went there, and the first thing that they said is when you get finished here, go down to Grand Central at that time, but like a Kmart and or a Walmart, and get a camp chair. I said, why would you get a camp chair? He says, that's the last thing that goes in your vehicle when you pack, and it's the first thing that comes out because it reminds you that that is your chair and you're supposed to be sitting there while the boys are out doing. They are the ones that are learning leadership. So I thought that's a great idea. So I went down and I got 2 chairs so that every time we went on our monthly camp out, I'd pull those 2 chairs, I'd sit them down, one for me and one for my senior patrol leader. So he'd come and sit with me, and we'd talk about things, what needs to be done in setting up camp, what the day's schedule looked like, what about meals, what about everything else. And then he'd go off and he'd take care of it with these patrol leaders. It was wonderful, but I never would have thought of that on my own. It came because I went to training. And we have all sorts of opportunity for training. We have the basic training. We've got youth protection training. You all should have taken youth protection training. If you haven't, please do so before the weekend's over. Because we work with youth, we're working there, we're involved, we're registered, we need to take youth protection training. There's no better youth protection program in the world than that which is with the Boy Scouts of America, and it helps us to know how to safely work with our youth. So training is extremely critical. How many of you have been to Wood Badge? Gee, that is really good. That is really good. Did you have 5 courses? Five courses every year. You really ought to have 10. This is such a stronghold. Everybody ought to be pointing south to the Phoenix area and saying, golly, how can we keep up with Phoenix? They have 10 Wood Badge courses every year. Up in the Utah National Parks Council, they're having entire stakes that are having their own Wood Badge courses. They're doing it through the council, but they're having a Wood Badge course that is directed with the priesthood. And so the stake president is there, and they're using the Wood Badge course, but they're all there together, and they come out not only understanding the leadership abilities that are taught there, but there's a unity that is absolutely amazing. So I encourage you to go to training. I encourage you, haven't been to Wood Badge, go to Wood Badge. I've been to a lot of training in my life, but other than the training I received as a mission president in the MTC, the very best training for working with youth has been Wood Badge. And I don't even remember them talking about Aaronic priesthood. But they taught the principles, and it came into my mind and my heart, and I began to apply it in my calling and my assignment. So the second T is training. The third T is tenure. Let me spell that for you. Tenyear. I told you that periodically when we met with the first presidency, we'd ask President Hinckley, what would you teach us? One day he turned to President Monson and he said, Tom, you have anything to say? President Monson came out of the chute like he was shot out of a gun. I've never seen anything. He says, I don't understand how we can expect to save young men when we're changing leaders every 3 to 5 months. It's absolutely impossible. Get the message? He felt very strongly. I mean, I wish I could have thrown him a softball as he hit it out of the park, but I'll tell you, it's a great message. Let me tell you what happens. I know, I've been in this work long enough to know what happens in the kingdom. We believe that a man must be called of God by prophecy, right? So what happens, we call a scoutmaster. He is registered. He takes youth protection training. He goes online. He takes the basic training. He takes the leader-specific training. He signs up for Wood Badge. And then we reorganize the Elders Quorum 6 months later. And the new Elders Quorum president said, Jim would make a great counselor in an Elders Quorum. I'd like to have him serve as my counselor. Jim is the new scoutmaster. So then it goes up through the High Council of the Stake Presidency, and everybody says, oh, Jim is really a good brother. He's faithful, and he does everything, and he's got a good family, a good supportive wife, but we never ask the right question. The question is, that opens up revelation to us. Why would we want to replace Jim, who has been serving as a scoutmaster and touching the youth of the noble birthright? He is setting patterns and traditions. He's helping to prepare them for missions. He has signed up for Wood Badge. He's all of a sudden starting to put some strength in this program that we haven't had for a long time. Why would we want to move him from that calling at this time? Once you have asked that question, then the revelation will come. And I will tell you, my experience tells me that 95% out of 100, the answer will come, absolutely right, he stays. But there will be a few of those times that you won't be able to explain where the answer is, because that's where he needs to be. But if you ask the question, remember, this is not new stuff for us in the kingdom. We have had ward missionaries and stake missionaries for years that have been called for 2 years. If you were in a stake mission presidency, you served for 3 years. And if somebody wanted you in a young men presidency, or somebody wanted you in a Sunday school presidency or another calling, you said he's still got 3 or 4 months or 6 months or 12 months left on his mission, we're going to leave him where he is. Why would we do any different for these youth? Have you ever talked to a missionary who has had 3 mission presidents and ask him who his mission president really is? Maybe it's because he had one mission president that finished, and then he had another one that got sick, and then he had another one. I've asked them. In every case, the comment is, none of them. And I will tell you that the transition in youth leaders is devastating in the lives of our young men. Leave them in long enough to make a difference. And by the way, just because they have gray hair, don't write them off, okay? Really, you got some brethren, I'm not talking about those who go prematurely gray, at 40 and they've still got great strength, but there are some of us that have gray hair or no hair that would give 15% tithing to work with kids, okay? And there are others who would give 20% not to be scoutmaster. I tell you, if you're going to call one of those to be scoutmaster, you better have one of the 3 Nephites on your side. Okay? Because those are the ones who are not going to perform really well unless they are the ones that the Lord really wants there. But if you've got somebody there, leave him there long enough to make a difference. We had a brother in our stake. When I became stake president, I was a scoutmaster, and we'd been in the stake just for about 7 or 8 months, and the stake was split, and I became the new stake president. I started interviewing missionaries as they came in. And from the Granite First Ward, the missionaries were unbelievable. They were solid. They were strong testimonies. They were energetic. They loved the Lord. They loved their mission. And I said, what was your best preparation? And other than their families, every one of them mentioned Boyd Lithgow. Well, I didn't know who Boyd Lithgow was because we were still new in the stake. And as a scoutmaster, you don't know much about people in the other wards. And so I got acquainted with Boyd Lithgow. Boyd had been scoutmaster for probably 12, 15 years at the time. Boyd had a horrendous stutter. Horrendous. And but he knew how to build men and missionaries. He was an amazing leader of men and missionaries. A number of years ago, I saw him in the store, and I said to him, he and his wife were there, and I said, Boyd, what have they got you doing in the church? And he said, well, and his wife said, you won't believe it, he's scoutmaster again. and I said, how long have you been scoutmaster? And he said, well, I don't know, 30 years, 40 years. I've watched him, and the kids just focus on him because, when somebody stutters, you focus on what they're saying, and you're there praying for them, and you're helping them to try to get that words out. Those kids absolutely loved Boyd Lithgow. Now, Boyd may never be a bishop, may never be a stake president, probably won't be. He's probably in his mid-70s now. But Boyd built men and missionaries. When you get them in there, leave them there. Let them make a difference. Let them keep up their traditions. And like I say, there are some who would die to stay there. Give them an opportunity to serve. The 4th T is time, and that is it just takes time to be a strong young man leader. It takes time because, number one, you have to get trained. Number two, you spend time on the weekends, on the weekend camping. You've got every Wednesday night. If you have a young man that is traveling and he's doing really well and he's an Eagle Scout, but he's traveling 4 days a week, don't call him as a scoutmaster. Don't do it. All it does is give him a guilt complex. Put him on the scout committee or give him an opportunity to do that. There will be a time when he can serve and when he can call. Now, sometimes the Spirit will really whisper strongly, and you better have a talk with him to see if that's something that he can do. But our son-in-law, who's now serving as a bishop, was called as a scoutmaster at a time when he was gone. He was gone almost the entire week, and it was extremely difficult for him and his boys. So those are the 4 T's. As you look for those leaders, one leader makes all the difference in the world. If you want somebody to really put life into your venturing or your varsity program, if you want them to help get those young men ready for missions, call somebody and just tell them you need to know that you're going to be in there for at least 3 to 5 years and maybe longer. And what we do, no, you don't need anything. You don't need anything. Remind me your last name. Bybee. Brother Bybee. We've been talking about we've needed a scoutmaster, and so we're going to call you as a venture or a teacher's quorum advisor and a varsity leader, and we'd like you to serve there. We've got sacrament meeting in just about 3 minutes, so I need to get on the stand. Will you accept that call?
I guess so.
Okay, great, thanks. Okay. Is that fair? Yet we do it so often. In fact, sometimes it's not even that. It's a call in the hall. Call in the hall is no call at all, remember? Okay? And yet so many, I've had my wife have calls issued in the hall, and you think, my golly, what are we all about? This is an important calling. Now, Brother Bybee, I'm glad you came in today. We have about 45 minutes until sacrament meeting starts, and so we have plenty of time to talk about this important calling after we talk about worthiness. We have had a vacancy coming up in our teachers' quorum, and we've had some challenges in that. We have 6 young men there who are active, and we have 5 who are not. We have a wonderful teachers' quorum president, but he has not been trained as he really should be. He does not understand significantly his keys, but he holds the keys of his presidency. And after prayer and after fasting, I am here today to issue a call to you to serve in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ as the teachers' quorum advisor and varsity coach. Before you respond to that call, let me tell you what it entails. You are the advisor, which means you advise a quorum president who holds the keys. Those keys are marvelous. He needs to understand the significance of those keys. That means I would expect you to spend some time training him in the scriptures as to what keys mean. We also have some young men who are not active. It is his responsibility as the president of the quorum and his counselors to go out and to bring them back, because it's his charge, with your help, to make sure that all 11 teachers are worthy and prepared to become priests. And if they do, then we'll be able to start working on them to prepare them to be elders and to go on a mission. Now, I expect you to be able, I know you haven't been working in scouting very long, and you have a little bit of smattering. I know you got some background in scouting as a young man, but I'd like you to, number one, be able to take youth protection training before we even sustain you, because we're not going to sustain you this week. We're going to sustain you next week after you've taken youth protection training and sent in your registration, if you accept the call. I'd like you to take all of the training necessary for the varsity program so that you really understand it. And then I'd like you to sign up and go to Wood Badge within 6 months. Now, that's a large responsibility, but these are the youth of the noble birthright. There's a big responsibility on your shoulders, but you are the one that the Lord wants in this calling. Will you accept that call?
Yes, I will.
Okay. Is there a difference? Don't we owe our young men leaders that, to be able to call them in a way like that? When you call an elders quorum president, don't you spend time with him and his wife? I used to have a little video, a little monitor on my credenza when I was a stake president. We'd go through a video strengthening the priesthood. We'd talk to them what it meant to be able to reactivate and do all of that stuff. This was just the short version. Okay? Thanks, Brother Pivey. Now, we are all in. Let me tell you one area where we're all in. I appreciate what you're doing with Friends of Scouting. It is a wonderful program. It's a wonderful opportunity for us to be able to grab on to this great program and to invite everybody to participate. Let me share with you an experience that happened in Ryrie, Idaho, a little farming town. In Ryrie, Idaho, the Area 70, like Elder Tillman, and by the way, what a great blessing to have these brethren at the head of this program in this valley. It is a great blessing, more than you know. The Area 70 met with the stake presidents. There were 5. And he said, brethren, we have our Friends of Scouting request from the council, but I think I would like to do it differently. This year, I am not interested in numbers. I'm not interested in making our goal or our quota that they've given us, the request. I am only interested in every home being visited and everyone being invited to give. And so I'm going to ask you to prayerfully consider this, and I want you to consider it in your ward councils, and I want you to do it in a way that blesses the lives of every individual and every home in this area. So the stake presidents went back. I know the story from one stake, the Ryrie stake. The stake president went back and he pulled these bishops together and he said the same thing to them. They then went to their ward councils. One ward council got together and they said, and he put it on the table, and the young women president said, well, we can help. You know, we've got people in our young women that have brothers. Why don't we take some of those families where they have brothers in the program? We'll go and visit them. And the Sunday school said, well, we'll take those that are less active. And the ward missionary said, we'll take some of those that are less active as well, and we'll go to some of the non-members that are in our area. And everybody worked together. And the issue was not just to go for an ask. It was to let them know why they were there, that it was time of Friends of Scouting, and that this is what it cost to be able to support a young man, and they'd appreciate any donation. But most importantly, it was to get acquainted with every single family in that stake. And then to ask, how can we help and serve you? The stake president wrote in the report that I received that not only did they move from $29,000 in that stake up to almost $90,000 in 2 years. That's a huge jump. But there was never a number given. There was never a number asked for. They had enough service projects for all of the organizations to last the whole year. They made their quota. There were some who were reactivated. There were some who were identified that they didn't even know were in their area. And there were some who began listening to the missionary discussions. All because of Friends of Scouting. It was because somebody took this wonderful opportunity where we just do it. We're in, we're all in. And they took it in a way that would bless the lives of those who are in their stake. Now, I'm grateful for the opportunity to serve in Scouting. I'm grateful for this assignment. I am grateful for the blessing of being involved in Scouting because I know that it blesses the lives of the young men of the Aaronic priesthood. When I was Young Men General President, it was very common for me to receive a note from someone all over the country. One came from Alaska that said, thank you for sending missionaries out who have been trained in first aid. We had one young man that was in a local restaurant and somebody was choking, and this young man immediately stood up, went behind them, did the Heimlich maneuver, and they shot a piece of beef across the cafe, and that individual is alive today. It's amazing the stories that come because our young men are prepared. That's what this is all about. Now, our time is almost up. We're close. Could we have 5 minutes just for some questions? Can we do that? Brethren, questions that you might have that we could ask. We don't want to prolong this. We've got some mics here. If you have a question, we got one right back there.
If I could ask, how do you run a Boy Scout program in a ward that only has 5 active young men from deacons, teachers, and priests?
Okay. Well, there are a number of options. And number one, go through your stake president, because remember, we've got a council, we've got a number of options. First, just because you have 1 or 2 in a quorum doesn't mean that you write it off. I've got a son-in-law who went through a program, had a great scouting program, made his eagle by the time he was 14, and he said, you know, Dad, Brother Sundquist, I was the only scout, but he ran the program with me. Now, it's hard to run the patrol method and to learn a patrol method with that, but, you know, remember that we're not there to run the patrol method. We're there to help these young men. And by the way, in this valley, there are thousands who are crying out to be involved in our program. It's called missionary work. And your young men know where they are. So one of the options is run the program as it is. If you join together, remember that by doing that, whether you join horizontally across wards or whether you do it vertically from deacon, teacher, and priest, either way, you decimate the keys of the priesthood unless you are very, very careful. Because if you decide, okay, in our stake, we're just going to have we're going to have a stake venturing unit, where are the bishops on Wednesday night? I will tell you, in 99.9% of the cases, they're not going to be with their priests. And by the way, in that type of an organization, it's generally not the priests that are running the program. It's your stake venturing leader or your stake young men president. And remember that it's the keys, it's the priesthood. This scouting program, interestingly enough, is designed to be run all over the world with 1 or 100 kids. And so I would suggest to you, now there are some ways they do need association with others, and you do that not by combining, but by planning. And there's nothing wrong with saying, okay, what other wards do we have in our area so that we can plan and plan activities together? And your ward can be one patrol, and you can get some from another quorum. So there are all kinds of ways to be able to do that, but I would really caution against the combining, because once you combine, think about combining the teachers and the deacons and the teachers. What happens to the keys? Once you combine that way, who really conducts the activity? It's the young men present in almost every case. And so all of a sudden the keys are gone, and those keys are so critical. Now, I know that there are a few where it has worked. And if you feel prompted to do that, then do it as you combine to grow, so that you combine so that you can have a stronger program, so that you can attract more youth, so that you can then divide again. Okay? I hope that's helpful to you. Another question? Yes, please. Church is standing on the Order of the Arrow. Order of the Arrow is a wonderful opportunity for our young men to be able to learn service. It's a great organization. Sometimes in the church we feel like Order of the Arrow is burning candles and keeping secrets. It's a secret organization. It is not. In fact, when I was in Boise, I never heard of Order of the Arrow. I'm taking my ordeal in March. And so I'm going to go through it because I feel like I need to be part of that. But when you see these kids, I'll tell you, you see them leading. I wish you could have seen the Order of the Arrow today out at the Baden-Powell University. Spectacular, wasn't it? Those kids were just wonderful in the way that they helped a young man over the bridge into scouting. So it's a great organization. I'd encourage you to participate and have your young men participate in that. Okay? Thank you very much. Another question? Maybe just one more if we have. Okay. Brethren, thank you very much for all that you do. God bless you for who you are. God bless you for the responsibilities that you have on your shoulders. These young men of the Aaronic priesthood are the finest generation, as President Hinckley often reminded us, and President Monson has reminded us, finest generation this world has seen, and yet the adversary is alive and well. We must be vigilant. We must be awake. We must rise up. God bless you. This is His word. God lives. Jesus is the Christ, and this is His priesthood. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.